Peter Griffin's name alone is enough to send shivers down the spine of anyone who's ever studied criminal law. Not because he's a mastermind criminal, but because he managed to stumble into breaking almost every statute in the book, usually by accident, often with a smile and always without consequence. What follows isn't just a character roast, it's a walkthrough of the many times Peter Griffin's behavior would have landed any ordinary man in court.
Could have been a lot worse if the cops knew about those other times I broke the law.
Picture this. The news announces that a black hole is expanding and the Earth has 24 hours left. For most people, the last day on Earth would be about family, reconciliation, or final bucket list dreams. For Peter, it's about storming into a zoo with a shotgun and walking out with a lion on a leash. That act alone breaks 3 laws at once: illegal firearm possession in restricted grounds, theft of a zoo animal, and animal endangerment. Zoos treat lions as government property, and federal law protects them from being removed or harmed. Peter doesn't sneak out with it either. He just drags the predator home like a trophy, smiling proudly while endangering his entire neighborhood. Later, he plays with a musket during a fantasy rescue mission, which would count as misuse of an unlicensed firearm. To him, it's comedy, but in reality, the combination of weapon charges and wildlife theft would be enough to put him behind bars for years.
Today I have a golden ticket to do whatever the hell I want.
Father's Day turns darker when Peter interferes in Joe Swanson's relationship with his estranged father. Without Joe's consent, he contacts Bud Swanson and invites him into town, then impersonates Joe to hide his disability. That's identity fraud, and when he pretends to be a police officer while patrolling with Bud, it also becomes impersonation of law enforcement. Courts treat that as a serious felony because people trust police authority. Peter doesn't just stop at pretending. He actively joins Bud in mocking handicapped people, even Joe's kids. In front of minors, it's emotional abuse layered on deception. In most legal systems, fraud doesn't require money to change hands. The very act of pretending to be someone else for personal gains is enough to be criminal. And here Peter gains approval and attention at Joe's expense. In reality, that kind of fraud tied to impersonating an officer could carry 10 years in prison.
Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Joe, you gotta go inside. You're upsetting my dad.
Your dad?
Then there's the horse. Sent out to buy beans, Peter returns with a brain-damaged animal that crashes into walls, urinates on the carpet, and terrifies the family. Buying and housing a horse in a suburban neighborhood without permits already breaks zoning and animal welfare laws, but Peter pushes it further by entering the animal into a race. The horse bolts into the crowd, injures bystanders, causes $100,000 worth of damage, and then dies of a heart attack. That's animal cruelty, destruction of property, and public endangerment in one storyline. In real life, racetrack officials would pursue him in civil court, and prosecutors would treat the forced racing of a brain-injured animal as aggravated cruelty. Instead of taking responsibility, Peter signs up for experimental medical trials, bringing unstable drugs into his household. His recklessness endangers Lois and the kids, and in legal terms, that's reckless endangerment with dependents exposed. Helping Quagmire turns into something even uglier when Peter becomes his manager. At first, it looks like loyalty, standing up for Quagmire when a client refuses to pay. But quickly, Peter starts booking clients, taking a cut, and dictating Quagmire's schedule. That's pandering, otherwise known as pimping, which is a felony in nearly every U.S. state. The crime gets worse with how Peter treats his friend. He insults him, slaps him around, and forces him to perform for food. Coercion raises the offense, turning what might have been a vice crime into exploitation. In legal terms, that's trafficking behavior, because the law doesn't just look at money changing hands, it looks at the power dynamics and whether someone is being forced. The show plays it for laughs, but Peter has effectively enslaved his best friend. In reality, that's prison time stretching decades.
Yeah, no, it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny. It wasn't funny. It was gay.
In another case, Peter uses an IQ test to his advantage. The results reveal he's below average, and instead of accepting it, he decides to exploit it. He pretends to be mentally incapacitated, dodging accountability at every turn. When he nearly kills Tom Tucker by reckless driving, he avoids charges by playing the disability card. He barges into women's bathrooms, starts bar fights, and treats every confrontation as untouchable immunity. Fraud of this type, falsely claiming a disability for personal gain, is a crime. But it gets darker when his actions burn Lois with hot oil during a fryer theft. The burns are severe enough for Child Protective Services to intervene and remove the kids. That alone would devastate most families. Instead of reflecting, Peter frames Cleveland by planting prostitutes in his home while Stewie is there. That's child endangerment, obstruction of justice, and defamation rolled into one. In real court, that would be impossible to walk away from.
Nothing, I'll get it.
Peter's assault of Kyle, the neighborhood bully, shows just how far he'll go when provoked. After Chris comes home bruised, Peter confronts Kyle, but instead of reasoning with him, he beats the 13-year-old until he's bloodied. Assaulting a minor is a felony, and the law doesn't make exceptions for parents or neighbors. Even when Lois drags him to apologize, Peter makes things worse. Kyle convinces him that bullying others feels good, and Peter takes the advice to heart. He returns home and terrorizes his family, mocking Lois, insulting Meg, and using Joe as a puppet. Domestic abuse, verbal harassment, and assault all pile on top of the original battery charge. In reality, Peter would face restraining orders, court-mandated counseling, and likely jail time. But in Quahog, it's just another day.
Oh, in the kitchen, Meg!
The Neighborhood Watch storyline pushes things into national headlines. Armed without training, Peter sees a shadow outside Cleveland's house and fires his gun, hitting Cleveland Jr. That's negligent discharge of a firearm, aggravated assault, and potentially attempted manslaughter. In real life, it would be an open and shut case. Instead, the police call it an accident, sparking racial tension throughout Quahog. Peter tries to prove he isn't racist by painting himself brown, staging photo ops, and even setting Cleveland's house on fire. Each attempt adds arson, trespassing, and reckless endangerment to his record. Courts take intent seriously, but recklessness with a gun is still a crime. Peter shot an unarmed minor and would be facing prison time measured in decades.
And my neighbor, Mr. Griffin, shot me. He said he felt threatened by me, and that hurt even worse than getting shot.
One of the strangest and most disturbing crimes comes when Peter tries to marry his own son. Carter Pewterschmidt names Chris heir to his fortune, and Peter, desperate for access, divorces Lois and proposes to Chris. It isn't played subtly. He travels to Vermont to make it official. That's incest under the law, even if the relationship is father-son. It's also marriage fraud and conspiracy to defraud Carter's estate. Chris, desperate for attention, goes along with it. The revelation that he knew Peter's true intentions and agreed anyway adds tragedy to the absurdity. In court, Peter would be prosecuted not just for fraud, but also for violating laws designed to prevent exploitation within families. Even in Vermont, where same-sex marriage was progressive, laws against incest and fraud remained strict.
Chris Griffin, will you marry me?
When Peter wins the lottery, the crimes don't stop. He takes out a second mortgage on the house without Lois's knowledge, which in many states is mortgage fraud. Then he spends millions recklessly, coercing his friends into humiliating performances, including synchronized dances while he shoots them with a BB gun. He blinds Joe in one eye permanently. That's assault with a weapon, no matter how small the caliber. He treats his friends suffering as entertainment while wearing a golden tuxedo. In reality, lawsuits would fly. Medical bills, civil damages, and criminal charges would follow him long after the money was gone. Instead, Peter returns to poverty like nothing happened.
Hey, Joe, open your eye. Gotcha!
The darkest violation comes after Stewie suffers a severe head wound. Instead of rushing him to the hospital, Peter treats it like a cover-up mission. He praises Chris for hiding it, tells Meg to disguise it with hats, and parades Stewie around in laughably poor disguises. That's felony child neglect. But then, panicking about exposure, Peter throws Stewie under a moving car to create a fake accident. That is no longer neglect. It is attempted murder. Prosecutors wouldn't hesitate. In reality, Peter would face life in prison for attempting to kill his own child. The show glosses over it with humor, but the act is one of the most disturbing in the entire series.
Hey, I just found out it's November. What the happened?
Outside of these storylines, Peter constantly brushes against the law. He drives drunk almost every time he leaves the Drunken Clam, stacking DUI charges that could cost him his license permanently. He commits tax evasion by spending inheritances, gambling winnings, and settlements without ever reporting income. He flashes crowds at sporting events, which would be indecent exposure and a sex offense if children were present. He pretends to be a doctor, writes fake prescriptions, and kills a patient with a defibrillator, practicing medicine without a license combined with involuntary manslaughter. He steals constantly, kidnaps people like James Woods, ropes his friends into conspiracies, detonates fireworks indoors, impersonates soldiers and police officers, and fakes injuries for insurance payouts. Each crime on its own could be jail time. Stacked together, they create a record no judge could ignore.
High five! All right!
Done!
When you add it all together, animal cruelty, child abuse, assault, fraud, pimping, impersonation, tax evasion, kidnapping, reckless endangerment, and attempted murder, you get a rap sheet that would keep anyone else in prison for life, several times over. Peter Griffin is a walking crime spree who dodges consequences only because he lives in a cartoon world. For Quahog, he's just the bumbling dad next door. For the law, he'd be public enemy number one.